There is a specific moment at every great party, a fleeting instant that goes almost unnoticed. The music is still loud, the champagne is still flowing, and the guests are dancing with a near religious fervor. But the hosts, the owners of the house, have quietly disappeared out the back door. You look around. The crystal chandelier shines brighter than ever. The orchestra plays at a frantic tempo. But if you pay attention, if you truly silence the noise of collective euphoria that the media injects into your veins every single day, you will feel a shift in the air pressure. The air no longer smells of celebration. It smells of ozone. It is the smell that precedes the storm. They lied to you about what it means for the market to be at an all-time high. They told you this is a sign of health, of vigor, of an economy roaring like a well-oiled engine. But history, that stern old teacher who rarely forgives inattentive students, tells a very different story. An artificial high, sustained not by real production but by monetary printing and rampant speculation, is not the top of the mountain. It is the edge of the precipice. And right now, while you are bombarded by headlines about artificial intelligence and the new economic paradigm, the smart money, the real money, the capital that builds empires and topples governments, is not buying. It is selling. It is liquidating. It is fleeing. To understand what is happening today on the balance sheets of Berkshire Hathaway or in the glass offices of Silicon Valley, you must first turn off the noise of the now and look back. Human arrogance is cyclical. We like to believe we are special, that our technology, our algorithms, and our central banks have tamed the beast of economic nature. The Romans thought the exact same thing. In the 3rd century, the Roman elite, the patricians who actually understood how the system worked, began to notice something the plebeians ignored while enjoying the Colosseum. The denarius, the silver coin that was the pride of the empire, was being diluted. Emperor after emperor mixed cheap metals into the coinage to pay the legions and fund the parties. Inflation did not explode overnight, it crept. And what did the elite do? While telling the people that Rome was eternal, they began swapping their fiat currency for land, for physical gold, for assets that could not be printed. They retreated to their fortified villas in the countryside, leaving the cities to the coming chaos. When the system collapsed, they were already gone. They used the final euphoria as exit liquidity. Fast forward to the 17th century. The Spanish Empire flooded with gold and silver from the Americas. Spain owned the world. But they made the fatal mistake of confusing money with wealth. They had the metal, but they did not have the industry. When inflation hit Castile, destroying the middle class and making exports impossible, the great Genoese and German bankers financing the Spanish crown saw the signal. They began demanding payment in real assets, draining Spain's wealth while the court in Madrid still celebrated its own grandeur. They sold the Spanish promise before it became a default. And, of course, we have 1929. Everyone's favorite story, yet rarely understood in its entirety. Months before Black October, Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy dynasty, supposedly received a stock tip from a shoeshine boy. Legend says Kennedy thought that if the shoeshine boy is giving stock tips, the market is saturated with fools, and it is time to get out. Whether fact or fiction, it hardly matters. The documented reality is that the great industrial barons began converting stocks into cash and government bonds months before the crash. They sold to the dentist, the teacher, the factory worker borrowing money to buy shares of RCA or Ford, believing the narrative of a permanent new plateau. The smart money needs someone to buy what they are selling. They need you. They need your greed, your fear of missing out, to let them exit the building without causing a panic, locking the door behind them. This brings us, with surgical and terrifying precision, to the current scenario. What we are witnessing is not just profit-taking. It is an exodus. It is a strategic withdrawal of biblical proportions, executed in broad daylight, but camouflaged by a smokescreen of technological optimism. Let's look at the data, not the opinions on television, but the cold numbers that do not care about your feelings or your retirement portfolio. Let's start with the oracle, Warren Buffett, the man who became an icon of American optimism, the grandfather who taught us to buy and hold forever. The public narrative about Buffett is comforting, but Buffett's actions in recent quarters are a deafening alarm bell. Berkshire Hathaway has accumulated a mountain of cash that defies comprehension. We are talking about a figure orbiting, and by some projections exceeding, $381 billion in liquid assets and short-term equivalents. Let's put that in perspective. That is more than the GDP of most countries on Earth. Why would the greatest investor in history, a man whose business is allocating capital to make it grow, decide to sit on a pile of cash that is theoretically losing value to inflation? The answer is simple and brutal. He sees value nowhere. Buffett has a simple rule: be fearful when others are greedy. And never in the history of the modern financial market have we seen such unchecked greed as now. By selling gigantic positions, including massive slices of his beloved Apple, a company he treated not as a stock, but as the third pillar of his business, he is sending a black smoke signal. He is saying that the price the market is willing to pay today is a hallucination. He is returning the paper to the market and taking the cash, preparing for what comes next. Buffett is not trying to time the market to make a few bucks. He is building a fortress of liquidity. When blood runs in the streets, when margin calls destroy hedge funds and retail investors are selling at any price just to pay rent, Buffett will be the only one with a checkbook in hand, ready to buy America's most valuable assets for pennies. He has done it before, but never on this scale. The sheer size of his cash position is the measure of the crisis he anticipates. He is betting against the stability of the current system, and history shows that betting against Buffett in the long run is a sentence of bankruptcy. But if it were just Buffett, we could argue it is the caution of a 90-year-old man. We could say he lost his touch, that he doesn't understand the new digital economy. But he is not alone. There is, at this very moment, a synchronized insider exodus. Executives, founders, CEOs, the people who have access to information you will only see on the news 6 months from now, are selling. And they are selling like there is no tomorrow. Look at Mark Zuckerberg at Meta. Look at Jeff Bezos at Amazon. We are seeing billions of dollars in sales of their own stock. The official narrative, the one public relations departments send to the financial press, is always the same. Portfolio diversification, tax planning, philanthropy. Do not be naive. There's a fundamental difference between a scheduled, routine sale, that small fraction of a salary an executive liquidates to buy a yacht, and what we call a massive exit sale at all-time highs. When the CEO of a company supposedly at the forefront of the AI revolution decides he prefers cash in hand over the stock of the very company he leads, that should make you stop and think. If the AI revolution is going to generate trillions of dollars in value in the coming years, as they promise us, why sell now? Why slaughter the golden goose? The logical answer, stripped of emotion, is that they know the current price is priced in not just success, but perfection. They know valuations have reached a point of hysteria where the only probable path is down. They are transferring the risk from their personal wallets to pension funds to passive ETFs, and ultimately to you. They are securing their generational fortunes with real money while leaving the public holding papers whose value depends on the collective belief that this time will be different. This disconnect between reality and price brings us to the third critical point, a metric blinking neon red on the global economy's dashboard, the Buffett indicator. Conceptually, it is elegant in its simplicity. It measures the total market capitalization of stocks against GDP. In a sane, rational world, this ratio should float around 100%. That would mean the financial market is a faithful reflection of the real economy. When you make money in the factory, the value of the factory goes up. Simple. However, what we see today is a statistical aberration. The Buffett indicator has broken barriers previously considered unbreakable ceilings. We're talking about levels of 185%, 190%, flirting with double the real economy. Think about what that means. The market is saying that companies are worth twice as much as the entire productive capacity of the nation that hosts them. This is mathematically unsustainable in the long run. It has surpassed the peaks of the dot-com bubble of 2000, a moment of collective insanity where profitless companies were worth billions. It has surpassed the peak of 2007 before the great financial crisis. We are in uncharted territory. The financial market has detached from Earth. It has become an autonomous satellite, fueled not by profits and production, but by injected liquidity and inflated expectations. And gravity is the one law the market cannot repeal. When the reversion to the mean happens, and it always happens, the fall will not be soft. It will be a violent correction to align the fantasy of prices with the hard reality of economic production. The indicator is not just expensive. It is screaming that the system is in a speculative bubble of historical magnitude. But you might look at your investment app and say, but the S&P 500 keeps going up. The market is strong. And here lies the greatest optical illusion of our era, the fourth pillar of this catastrophic scenario, the illusion of the Magnificent Seven. The stock market as a whole is not going up. That is a statistical lie. What we are seeing is an unprecedented concentration of risk in just a handful of companies. NVIDIA, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and Tesla. These 7 corporations, driven by the AI narrative and the passive flow of ETF money, are carrying the entire index on their backs. They have become black holes of capital sucking all the oxygen out of the room. If you have the morbid curiosity to remove these 7 companies from the equation and look at the S&P 493, the other 493 largest companies in America, you will see a radically different picture. You will not see a bull market. You will see a stagnant market struggling to breathe, or in many sectors, already in a silent bear market. The real economy, represented by transport, manufacturing, basic retail, and energy, is not invited to the party. They are suffering from high costs, high interest rates, and exhausted consumers. The appearance of health in the general index is a mask. It is like a general marching pompously into battle, not realizing his entire army has deserted and he is alone on the field. This concentration creates extreme systemic fragility. If one or two of these companies stumble, if Nvidia says chip demand dropped 10%, or if Apple faces regulatory issues in China, there will be nothing to cushion the fall. The entire index will crumble because there is no broad support. It is an inverted pyramid, balanced precariously on the tip of 7 corporate logos. And the super rich know that inverted pyramids do not stand forever. To solidify the argument that we are living in a financial hallucination, we need to talk about the price paid for hope. In the market, this is measured by the PE ratio. How much do you pay today for $1 of a company's profit? Historically, the average hovers around 15 or 16 times earnings. That is reasonable. You invest, and in 15 years, the company pays for itself. But today we are seeing average indices above 22, 25, 28 times. In tech sectors, we see multiples of 50, 80, 100 times earnings. Understand what this means in practice. If you buy a stock with a PE of 50, you are implicitly accepting that it will take half a century for that company's current profits to cover your initial investment. Or you are betting that the company will grow at explosive, uninterrupted rates for the next 10 years. But here's the problem. Companies do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in a world of high interest rates, fragmented supply chains, and indebted consumers. Paying infinite growth prices for companies facing a cyclical slowdown is the definition of financial insanity. It is the greater fool theory in action. You buy something expensive, not because it is worth it, but because you believe there will be a greater fool to buy it from you for an even higher price tomorrow. The smart money looks at these multiples and sees a mathematical trap. They know that when interest rates rise, the present value of future profits falls. The math does not work. There's no way to justify these valuations based on fundamental cash flows. So what is left? Only faith. Faith in AI, faith in the Fed, faith that the music will never stop. But the smart money is atheist when it comes to market faith. They believe in cash flow, in tangible assets, in a margin of safety. And when they look at the current market, they do not see safety. They see a casino where every table is rigged against the house, and the only way to win is to cash out your chips and leave before the bouncers lock the doors. So far, we have analyzed the crime. We have seen the fingerprints at the scene, Buffett's hoarded cash, the fleeing CEOs, valuation indicators screaming danger, and the fragility of a market propped up by only 7 pillars. But the question that must be burning in your mind now is not just why are they selling, but rather, where is that money going? Because money, the lifeblood of the economy, does not disappear. It moves, it flows. And if it is leaving stocks, it is seeking refuge elsewhere. And it is here, by following the trail of the runaway money, that the story becomes even darker and more revealing. What they are secretly buying while you fight for crumbs on the stock exchange is the key to surviving what lies ahead. The flight to quality is not a panic event. It is a calculated, cold, mathematical movement. When the titans of capital realize that the risk of staying in the stock market outweighs the potential reward, they do not stuff cash under the mattress. They park it in the most fundamental infrastructure of the financial system. They are buying short-term U.S. government debt, treasury bills. Think about this for a second. For over a decade, cash yielded nothing. Interest was zero. You were forced to speculate in tech stocks or dubious cryptocurrencies just to get some return, but the game has changed. The board has flipped. Now, you can get yields of 5% or more, guaranteed by the dollar printing machine, without running the risk of seeing your wealth drop 20% in a single bad day on the stock market. For a billionaire investor, the math is irrefutable. Why risk billions in an inflated stock market with PE ratios in the stratosphere, trying to make maybe 7 or 8% if everything goes right, when you can lock in 5% doing absolutely nothing? It is what we call the risk-free rate. And when that rate rises, it acts like a giant magnet sucking liquidity out of risk assets. That is why we see money market funds with trillions of dollars parked. It is dry powder. It is capital that has left the gaming table and is waiting on the sidelines. They are being paid to wait for the collapse. It is the most comfortable position in the world. But it is not just government paper they are accumulating. There is something older, more primal, and ironically more sophisticated: gold. And I am not talking about paper ETFs that promise gold. I'm talking about physical possession and strategic allocation. While Western media ridicules gold as a barbarous pet rock, the central banks of the world, China, Russia, Poland, India, are buying gold at a pace we haven't seen since the end of the gold standard. Private smart money is following the same path. Why? Because gold is the only financial asset that is not someone else's liability. If you hold a bond, you depend on the government's solvency. If you hold a stock, you depend on the company's performance. If you have money in the bank, you are a creditor to the bank. Gold is sovereignty. In a world where global debt is unpayable and the only mathematical solution is the devaluation of fiat currencies through inflation, gold is not an investment to get rich. It is fire insurance for the monetary system. The super rich are building a barge of treasury bills for immediate liquidity and a bunker of gold for generational wealth preservation. They are hedging against both scenarios, the deflation of a market crash and the inflation of a currency crisis. And while they build these fortifications, the crowd is seduced by the siren of the moment, artificial intelligence. This is the seventh point of our analysis, and perhaps the most controversial: the AI bubble theory. Do not get me wrong, the technology is real, the revolution is real. Artificial intelligence will change the world as much as electricity or the internet did. But this is a giant but. Great technology does not necessarily mean a good investment at the current price. We need to look at history, at the year 1999. The internet was real. It truly changed everything. But if you bought Cisco Systems or Intel stock at the peak of the bubble, driven by the certainty that the internet is the future, it took you more than 20 years just to recover your nominal money, not counting inflation. We are seeing the same mass psychology today. The euphoria surrounding AI has created a buy-at-any-price mentality. The valuations of AI-linked companies discount a future where they will hold global monopolies and infinite profits, with no competition, no regulation, and no technical problems. This is science fiction, not financial analysis. The market is pricing in perfection. NVIDIA, for example, is a phenomenal company, selling shovels in a gold rush. But when everyone has already bought a shovel and most prospectors haven't found enough gold to pay for the shovel, what happens to the shovel seller? Cyclical demand will hit the sector. The smart money knows that trees do not grow to the moon. They saw this movie in the Nifty 50 bubble in the 70s, in the dot-com bubble in the 2000s. They know that when the narrative is, "this time is different," it is the exact moment history is about to repeat itself. They are selling the hope of AI to the retail investor and pocketing the reality of hard cash. But what will actually pop this bubble? What is the pin that will find this bloated balloon? It is our eighth point, the trigger of higher for longer interest rates. The market spent the last year deluding itself, betting that the central bank would cut rates drastically, returning to the era of easy money. They were wrong. Inflation is sticky. The structure of the economy has changed, and interest rates remained elevated. This acts like a corrosive acid at the base of the economy. During the decade of zero interest rates, we created an entire class of corporate aberrations, zombie companies. These are companies that do not generate enough profit, even to pay the interest on their debts. They only survived by taking out new cheap loans to pay off old ones. It was a legalized corporate Ponzi scheme, but now cheap money is gone. The refinancing wall is coming. Trillions of dollars in corporate and commercial real estate debt will mature in the next 24 months. These companies will have to refinance their debt not at 2 or 3%, but at 7, 8, or 10%. The math simply does not close. They will not be able to pay. We will see a wave of bankruptcies, restructurings, and layoffs. This monetary tightening drains liquidity from the system. It is like draining the oil from the engine of a speeding car. The engine might keep spinning for a few miles due to inertia, but internal friction is increasing every second. The heat is rising. Eventually, the engine seizes. The super rich, those with access to real balance sheets rather than adjusted ones, see the smoke coming from under the hood. They know the real cost of capital has risen, and that this forces a revaluation of every asset on the planet. If money costs 5%, a property yielding 3% in rent has lost value. A stock yielding 1% in dividends has lost value. It is financial gravity reasserting its authority. And as if internal fragility weren't enough, we look outside and see the ninth element of the perfect storm, the geopolitics of fear. The world of globalized free trade, which allowed for high profit margins and low inflation for the last 3 decades, is dead. We are entering an era of fragmentation. Trade wars, tariffs, sanctions, armed conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. This is not just political noise, it is economic poison. Global instability breaks supply chains, which is inflationary. It forces companies to duplicate factories and inventory, which destroys efficiency and profit margins. And most dangerously, it creates the ghost of stagflation, the worst of all worlds, where you have economic stagnation and high inflation at the same time. In this scenario, stocks fall and bonds also lose real value. Where do you hide? The smart money uses geopolitics as the final pretext to take profits. They know a missile in the wrong place or a naval blockade in a strategic strait can tank the market 20% on a Monday morning. Why carry that risk when you have already won so much? They are selling exposure to geopolitical risk. They are bringing capital home or moving it to neutral jurisdictions and tangible assets that cannot be confiscated or sanctioned with the click of a button. So we arrive at the denouement, the strategic conclusion. What does all this mean for you? What is the smart money playbook, the game plan they are using, and that you should study with the reverence of a sacred text? The first rule of the playbook is patience is a weapon. The amateur investor feels they need to be in the market all the time. They feel that if they aren't buying, they are losing. The professional knows that money is made in the buying, not the selling. And to buy well, you must wait for the right price. Buffett, Bezos, the big funds, they are not in a panic. They are in a predator stance. They are accumulating liquidity, the largest cash position in history, because they know the opportunity of the decade is approaching. They know that bubbles burst. They always burst. And when they burst, the pendulum swings violently from irrational optimism to suicidal pessimism. Assets of incredible quality, solid companies, well-located real estate, productive land, will be put up for sale for a fraction of what they're worth, because their current owners will be leveraged, desperate, and forced to liquidate to cover debts. It is in that moment when blood is in the streets, when the media says capitalism is over, when your friends swear never to invest in the stock market again. It is in that moment that Buffett's cash fortress will open its gates. What they are doing now is preparing for the feast. They are selling high to you so they can buy low from you in a little while. It is a programmed transfer of wealth from weak, impatient, and emotional hands to strong, patient, and analytical hands. The brutal lesson of this video is not for you to sell everything and run for the hills in despair. It is for you to stop being the foolish counterparty to their trades. Stop chasing all-time highs. Stop using leverage in a market flashing warning signs. Start building your own liquidity reserve. Start educating your mind to identify real value, not hype. Understand that the crisis is not the end. The crisis is the system's cleaning mechanism. And for those who are prepared, liquid, and sober, the coming crisis will not be a tragedy. It will be the greatest wealth-building opportunity of your life. The market is an efficient mechanism for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Warren Buffett is already sitting at the dinner table, napkin in his lap and cutlery in hand, waiting for the main course to be served. The question you must ask yourself as you look at your own portfolio and your own financial choices today is simple. When the dish is served, will you be the diner? Or will you be the dinner? The choice, as always, is yours, but the time to choose is running out.